never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting stars break the mold.
Welcome to another episode of the NRL Allstars podcast. Barnesy, your host of the Allstars podcast, here for one of the final team previews ahead of the 2026 NRL SuperCoach season. For this one, we are doing the Newcastle Knights, who have already had their team named, so we do have a few good indicators as to where we should go for this weekend's matchup against the Cowboys. For this one, we got Robbie Constantopoulos with us. Robbie is a former top 30 finisher, also a brother of a former SuperCoach overall champion, so has the pedigree and has been on the show many times. Robbie, welcome back, mate.
Thanks for having me again, Barnesy. We're nearly there. We're only about 3 sleeps to go before we can see some real footy action, so let's go.
Yeah, great time of year, and it's a good time of year to talk about the Knights because they'd have their hopes up this year. After finishing near the bottom the last couple of years, or at the bottom, we should see an improved season from them. I guess probably the first thing that we are going to talk about is the most relevant, and that is the changes to the Knights roster. And look, pretty significant. They've got Dylan Brown that's come in and Sandon Smith that's come in, and both of those are pretty big signings. Also, a little under the radar, though not for SuperCoaches, is Trey Mooney being there as well. With the losses, I don't think that there's too many significant ones. Like, a lot of them have ended up being, fringe first grade types, aside from Leo Thompson and Kai Pearce-Paul, which does make their pack a little bit light, which we'll see with the team that they've named as well, with the 3 forward bench and really missing probably some front row strength there. I am optimistic for Knights fans, Robbie, that they'll have an improved season this year. They haven't looked great in the trials that we've seen, but at the moment, Kalen Ponga is healthy. They've got all their stars are on deck. It's a much improved spine, and really, they should be looking ahead for a much more positive season than last at minimum.
Yeah, there's been a lot of change with Dill Brown and Shannon Smith coming in. I think the other big change is obviously a new coach, Justin Holbrook, and he's got a different style to the way they play. I mean, last year, they were rock bottom, but on points scored as well, they were, rock bottom as well. So I think bringing Holbrook in is looking to really improve that attack, and they've brought those players in to help with that. The depth's probably going to be their biggest issue, and we saw last year that a lot of their players, which we'll get into, they really went down at middle of the season, couldn't recover. So I think that's going to be their story this year. If they can keep their top 20 together, you should see improvement. But if injuries come, especially to some of their key players, they'll start to struggle pretty quickly.
Yeah, and unfortunately on that topic, they are a side that has a lot of key players that miss a lot of games. So Kalen Ponga notoriously cannot finish a season, and then we've got Bradman Best as well, who's been plagued with hamstring injuries for a few years now. Even Dom Young's coming back from a pretty severe injury not long ago, although he's been reasonably durable. But Marzhew, he's been hounded a little bit in recent seasons. It's not great. And then you look at like the young guys like a Dylan Lucas, and he missed a chunk of last year injured as well. So you need those guys to be playing a lot more. When you go through the SuperCoach numbers, a lot of these guys are sort of in that 15 to 18 range of games played. There isn't very many that you see that are relevant that actually go 20-plus games in an NRL season. And across 27 rounds of football with a few buys in there, it's pretty important to have those guys playing 20-plus games in a season to be competitive if you don't have the depth. I guess it does feed into their draw, Robbie, which we're going to touch on as well. They play in Vegas this week, which is registered as a home game for them, but it's not quite. It's pretty far away from the Novocastrians over at Newcastle. But North Queensland Cowboys is a really good matchup first up. The Cowboys, as we've spoken about on this podcast, even if they improve, they're going to give up points. It'll be shootouts. Manly away, I think that this looks a lot better recently. I'm super down on Manly this year. They looked poor in the trials, gave up a lot of points. At home versus the Warriors, which is really important because playing away in New Zealand is not good for the Newcastle Knights. Then they've got Bulldogs and Raiders going into the second month, Tigers, Roosters and Penrith. It's a bit of an interesting one because I think that the first 3 rounds are pretty good for them. Although the travel of Vegas, we'll see how that plays out for their away game against Manly in round 2. But I think it's a generally good 3-round matchup for Newcastle. Probably a lot of it comes down to how they can hit the ground running, how those combinations work. And if they start off a bit clunky, we might not see the points improve much. And that's a big thing. Like they could have the best SuperCoach guys in league talent-wise, but if their side is at the bottom of points scoring, there's just not going to be enough SuperCoach opportunities. So we need those new combos to fire, don't we?
Yeah, and looking at the draw a bit more, as you said, those first 3 games are really good, but then they go into a bit of a tougher patch in that middle period, and then by the time when the draw becomes a bit softer, they're coming up to their first bye is round 12 as well. So probably about round 9, 10, where the draw starts to get a bit softer, and that you're starting to think in the bye rounds they're not going to cover that first big bye. So I really think if you're going to consider Newcastle Knights players, you probably want to get this 3-game run in from the start. And then if they're performing, that you can hold them up until that round 12 bye. You're not gonna face that in the early rounds. So it's definitely, if you're keen on these guys, then it's probably better to start earlier rather than picking them up later as we approach that period.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's 2 really clear times to buy them. Round 1, as you said, but then they don't play the round 12 big buy or the round 15 big buy. So round 16 onwards actually looks for a pretty good run home. They got the Dragons at home in round 16, the Tigers at home round 17, and the big buy round of Dolphins at home in round 18. 3 games in a row, one of them the last big buy round, and then they play the mini big buy round after that with the round 19 matchup against South, which is an away one. But it is a decent run home for them. They might only have maybe 4 teams from round 16 onwards that make the 8, depending on how different our results are this year to last season. But then they're really smashed by having the bye in round 27 as well, although that's pretty far away, and it's after the head-to-head finals in round 26, so not too bad. So, yeah, it's an interesting draw for them. We're going to look at the players now. The first player off the gun list, when we're going down their guns, is Dylan Lucas. And I do think with Lucas, he's gone a little under the radar to start this season, because anyone who casts their mind back to last year will automatically remember the big run from every SuperCoach to get him in your side. He had an amazing season, and that culminated in a 76-point average for the SuperCoach season, up from 63 the year before. And quietly, though, a lot of us kind of thought that he would get to that point. But it's interesting how he did it, though, because he did it differently than what I think a lot of people, including me, thought that he would get to 76 points a game. He's going to cost $744,000, so he's a massive premium, which is why he's a huge pod. But only 5 tries in 13 games, and like for a lot of back rowers, that's good, but we see him as such a strike weapon. He was a centre wing duel last year, which he's lost now. 5 tries in 13. It's not outside the realm of possibility that he's going to improve on that strike rate, because he is a noted try scorer. They were scoring a lot less points than what we hope they will this year. He only actually had 3 below 60, though, and this is where it gets really interesting. He had only went below 50 base power once, and his base power for the season was 63. Now, I think going into the year, a lot of us were like, look, he's going to get some big scores because of his attack, but we didn't really count on him having such an amazing base power. And that's only 13 game sample size, so we have to just have that caveat in there. But he really showed that every single week he was going to be good. It didn't matter if he scored tries.
Yeah, as you said, the base power is what's really gotten him to that premium price, and he's going 60 plus 69% at the time. So you're paying top dollar at $744,000, but you're really every time he's walking on the field, you're guaranteed almost a 60 plus score. And we've seen in games that he's the type of player that can go for multiple tries in games. So he had a high of 147, so he's got the ceiling there as well. And really, that left side of the Knights is going to be the side that's the dominant. And not much has changed on that left-hand side. So they can put it together. I can see some really big scores from Dylan Lucas. And as you said on your first line, going under the radar, he is going under the radar at 3%. And I feel like this is the general theme on a lot of Knights players as we get into it a bit more. So he won't let you down. It's not for me at the moment, just because I think there's a lot of options in the second row forward that you can consider. But if you do want to pot up and go there, it could pay off, and he's not going to let you down.
Yeah, and I've seen people look at the pod route in their forward pack, looking at someone like Hudson Young. And Hudson Young is still relatively low owned, but Dylan Lucas is much less low owned, and they're of a similar price point. And I do think that some of those people that want to splurge on that type of second rower should be looking at someone like Lucas. And it's one of those ones that we say about so many players, but it's really true with Lucas. If he was 100k less, which isn't massive when you consider he's 744, it's not a big price drop off 744, but he would just open up so much for ownership. It's just that he's just so expensive, and he might end up with a really good season, but averaging 70 rather than 76. I actually think that he will replicate his season because I think there'll be more tries there and more opportunity for him. I think that will basically balance out the base power dropping maybe slightly, but I really, really like him. I wish that I got him in draft. I will go out on a limb and say I think that he's their best SuperCoach player by a ways. But this next guy has been their best SuperCoach player before, and that is Kalen Ponga. And how the mighty have fallen for Kalen Ponga. When the game first opened with Team Picker Robbie, Kalen Ponga was one of my first players I threw in there because I went 607,800. Wow, that's amazing. Can't wait to play with him in my SuperCoach team. But all of a sudden, I looked at the numbers and was really quite worried. And then he was in a moon boot for a lot of the off-season. We didn't see him in the trials. He is going to play this weekend. He's playing his first club in the Cowboys, which is always a nice matchup for him. But look, I think that he's a really viable option. I think he should be in way more teams. But there is cause for concern when you look at his numbers. 1 try in 13 games last year. That's really bad. I guess the optimism would be that he's got to improve on that. 33 base power is awful for a fullback, and he only netted 5 points per game overall in goals with goal kicking. So you look at that and go, geez, his floor's like 38 with goal kicking. That's awful. And you look at the year before, though, and you can really see where the drop-offs happened. He had a 40 base power in 2024, almost 11 points per game in goals. And that's really going to be where the battle's won. Like, can he get back to that? Some of these other new moving parts in that spine going to take away from him, including the ascension of someone like Fletcher Sharp that's in there at 6 now. It's hard to say whether he's going to try to play more of a complementary role or get more opportunity, but he's got to get back to that 40 base power. The Knights have to get back to scoring points at a higher rate than last year for him to be really relevant and anywhere near what he used to be.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we do need to touch on is in the last 3 years, his games on field have reduced significantly. So he only fronted up 13 games last year. I think that was down from 15 the year before and 18 the year prior to that as well. So he's just not durable as well. So I look at him as a not if, but when he goes down. And there's a lot of question marks about his health coming into the season. I know he's named to play round 1, but we really do not know how he's going to look. We haven't seen anything. The price point is really enticing. You'd think there'd be a bit more attack. 1 try, last year is, he's surely going to get more tries. If the Knights improve their attack, there should be some more goals in, points in goals. But as you said, really that base has been dropping off. And again, like you're paying, I think people are just looking at him as a gun in the past where, last year only half the time he was going 60 plus as well. So you're not really guaranteed to get also there's just too many red flags for me to, jump in where around that price point as well, you've got a lot of good, mid fullbacks and that have got that potential to match his scoring, if not better that scoring.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think if it was a different season, there was a good chance that I would have Kalen Ponga still in my side. Like if it was a season with no cheapies and I wanted 3 gun fullbacks, there's a good chance I'd go like Teddy, Drinkwater and Ponga because Ponga is like one of the cheaper ones that you can put in there. And I think that would have been really viable. It's just a year where there's so much competition with these few 500 to 600k guys that are really viable to have in your fullback or flex spot. I think that's what really hurts Ponga as well. I will say to finish off on Ponga though, I am not petrified because it's not going to hurt me much because Ponga and Lucas are both reasonably low owned, particularly Lucas at 3%. but I'm petrified that I'm not going to have two of the biggest scores in the round because I genuinely think that Ponga and Lucas could both turn up in that Cowboys game if the Knights are really competitive. And it's just such a great matchup for them. But like you said, when we were talking about the draw, Robbie, like if you don't have Ponga for the first few weeks, you're not going to trade him in after that. So, it's kind of like if you do believe in him, you can't really afford to watch and see. I'd say that if you really, really think that he's going to go back to the 2 years before where he's averaging 81 and 87 points rather than his 62 of 2025, then you just have to bite the bullet and start with him. But, I wouldn't blame any coach if they did. Like if any coach wants to say, hey, he's kicking goals, the Knights are going to score 15, 20% more points this year, he's going to be back to form. I wouldn't argue with anyone at 600K, I understand.
Yep, can't add much more. So good luck to you.
Sharp is the guy that we mentioned before, and he 730,700 is because he had a massive season. It's really quite interesting when you look at his numbers too, because I sort of looked at him and went, look, there's no way I'm paying that money for him. And look, there still probably isn't for my team in particular, but I do think he's more enticing than what we think. Because when I looked at it, I was like, look, 11 tries in 14 games. It's exactly what I thought. And it's a very similar reading to Dylan Lucas, right? Guy that gets his points from try scoring, that strike rate that he's already got is very hard for him to keep up. I doubt that he will. But I was super surprised, mate. When I looked at his base power, it was 48. And it was just awesome. And I was like, that's really good for him because I really thought he was almost in that Alex Johnston type of mold, just scoring tries to beef up his stats. But he actually averaged over 10 points per game just in TBs. And that's where it's at. Like he had one game where he had 34 points only in tackle breaks. And when you look at that, it's phenomenal. And you also need to, I guess, balance the fact that he's scored a really, really high strike rate that's hard to replicate with the fact that he had barely any assists or anything. So 3 try assists, 1 last touch try contribution. That's not going to go down. Even if he has less usage than what he did last year with the ball with, Dylan Brown, that's not going to go down and it's probably going to go up. So the more I looked at it, the more I went, wow, Sharp's a bit of a smoky too. And it's just the theme for these guys, isn't it? So expensive, like Dylan Lucas, almost the same price. But I'm seeing some coaches in the last few days start to get on him.
I'm one of those coaches.
Oof.
I'm just going to disclaimer, one of those coaches. And I was looking at the numbers. And as you said, the more you look at it, the more I warm to him. And looking at the 5'8" position holistically, it's a crap position. I know yourself and me, we were on the TMM and Peasant route, and obviously that got taken away from us. And everyone's just jumping to Cody. And, and listening to your Souths podcast really kind of highlighted to me, hey, I've got to look at different route because round 4 bye, you've already got 4 bunnies in there. You can't really carry them. Cody, he looked better, but, he is an injury risk as well. So the second he goes down, where are people going to go to? So I've taken an alternate run looking at Fletcher Sharp. Why not pay up for someone that averaged 75 last year? And this number to me stuck out to me. He went 60 plus 50% of the time. What percentage of time do you reckon he went 80% of the 80 points plus?
Going to go 28%.
50% of the time. So if he is going over 60, he's going 80 plus. So that really just shows that he's got the ceiling on him. And we can all remember Magic Round as well last year where he lit it up. And the way the Knights played last year, he was central to everything they were doing. He was creating, he was backing up through the middle. He's going to be around the ruck. So it all just points to the narrative to me that if you're a believer that the Knights are going to improve and score more points, he is going to be a key part of that. Said it's not really down to his, assists, so he's not going to be impacted by too much by the new scoring. It's his tackle bus. He's going to be the one, backing up through the middle when they make a break. I see Fletcher Sharp as being the top scoring 5'8" this year. And I'm willing to go all in from the start, get those 3 games. And I would not be surprised if he is averaging 90 in those first 3 games.
Massive.
And at 3% ownership as well, he is not being looked at all.
Yeah, no, I don't mind you going for it because 5'8" is such a poor position. And I'm not a big Munster fan at the moment. Like, I do think that he's on the downward. And I know I don't think that it's too much of a leap to say Fletcher Sharp will be better than Munster this year, and really you don't have a lot of other competition when you go past that as well. So I agree with you, he'll be the number 158. Don't know about the 90 over 3 weeks. It could happen though, because he did average just 75 across the whole season over a few
I'll be
weeks.
one of the 3% happy when it happens. But just to also add as well, I mentioned Ponga's durability as well. If Ponga goes down, he's fullback. He goes straight back to fullback. And,
those tackle breaks that we spoke about before, like at fullback, they just go through the roof. It's really enticing. I will say, though, that there was some quotes that were quite disparaging from the coach in the last 24 hours because he was asked about Sandon Smith and the halves combo. And he said, look, Sandon will play plenty of half this year, and Fletcher Sharp is a really important moving piece in our team going forward. And it's quite discouraging if you're looking at Fletcher long term, because it is a matter of how much will he be moved around. I mean, the craziest thing in the world to happen, which you would think wouldn't, but coaches do crazy stuff, and that is, putting Sandon Smith on into the halves and moving Fletcher Sharp to the bench and not playing him a full 80 or doing some weird stuff like this, or Fletcher Sharp ending up on the wing, which people were talking about. Things like that would be horrific for him, aside from the fact that if you didn't own him, though, it would be a positive because you end up with getting a dual player later on potentially. But those are the risks, aren't they? It's just with the moving parts. He hasn't really won the number 6 jersey entirely, even though, it looks that way because he's been named.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you said, look, this is not something I've done, not disregarding the risk. There is a lot of risk involved in it, but it's always said that you can't win SuperCoach by doing the same thing everyone's doing. So this is one area I see a bit of difference. And if in those 3 games it doesn't work out, well, look, I'm going straight down to whoever emerges and building a bit of bank on that front to prop up somewhere else. So all in. And Vegas as well. If anything to go on Magic Round last year, and he's at Vegas in the spotlight, who knows, another hat trick might be on the cards.
Well, I am rooting for you slightly. I don't want you to go better than me, but I hope you go well with him. I'd probably say, I think that it's a fine strategy. Grabbing an expensive pod like Fletcher that has got such a good ceiling and scores so well consistently, I think it's a great move to do. What people need to be wary of is not doing 2 or 3 of those, which I've seen in some teams, and some teams have asked me for advice, and I've said, look, pull up, because the more pods you get in, the more you're going to fail, because it's not easy to hit on a really good pod for the run at low ownership. And if you try and do it too much, you have 5 or 6 of them, probably 4 of them are going to fail. If you just have one, you can hit on that one and not fail on any, and then that puts you enough ahead. So just be really careful with how many of these guys you risk it with, but Fletcher is certainly worth it, I think. Dylan Brown, 535,000. He is as cheap as ever, coming in and named to start at halfback, which surprised some. I wasn't really. I think that this was the halves comment they were going for. I just thought that Sandon would end up starting at 9, but that hasn't happened. If you remove his low minute game, he's closer to a 40 base power, but last season he was only a 30 base power. And even moving it up to the high to mid 30s is still pretty crap for Dylan Brown. 5 tries in 19 games is low. It's not that low for him. And what I was probably most down on was when I looked at it with his playmaking. He actually still had 11 tries this last year and 13 try contributions in 19 games, which is actually not bad for him. So you look at that and go, well, he's going into a pretty heavily, playmaker type spine with Fletcher Sharp and Ponga there that he's sharing with. Can he really improve on, that type of 70% strike rate on try assist type of thing, and also all those, try contributions? Probably not. And it really made me quite down on him, Robbie, when I was looking at it, because I know a few people are on him, and I understand because he is quite cheap. I actually think he's going to take a bit of time to settle in. Obviously, he's played with Moses, but Moses has missed a lot of time the last couple of years too. And I do think that a lot of more casual super coaches went with him thinking that, it felt like last year he came off the bench more. He was playing out of position a lot more. Not really. It was sort of the back third. He had 4 games or something, but there wasn't a lot of his season that was out of position. He was at 6 a lot of the time. So I'm quite down on Brown, and I think at 55 points per game, it wasn't as bad a season as what a lot of us kind of remember it as.
Yeah, and you got a real insight last year as to how his style of play will be as the main man and halfback. Last year Moses was out for quite a period and he had to take the reins. That average is a reflection of what he will be averaging as a halfback at Newcastle. And just the look of him, he just does not look comfortable in that sort of role. So who knows what a full off season will do for him. But there's a lot of moving parts in that team, a lot of new faces. So if he was to come and really show really good signs, you might consider getting on. But you've got Mitch Moses at similar price point who's picking up the goal kicking, so if he should be getting points uplift and value uplift. I just don't see the uplift in deal bags at all at this point in time. So I'm just happy to sit and learn past.
Yeah, I think he'll average 60 plus for the season. But I don't think he's getting back to his 70s that he was in 2022, 2023. And I do think that he's easily the least viable option in SuperCoach in that trio of Ponga, Sharp, and Brown.
And another thing as well, he didn't turn up last year either. So his ceiling is completely gone as well. So yeah.
Well, it used to be about his floor. Like it used to be like you always get 50 out of him at least, but he wasn't even doing that last year. And I think that he will struggle to get used to his new role and new team. And I think that will come through in his SuperCoach scoring. He might go for a good run and get used to things. And he's a good enough player, $13 million. He'd want to be a good enough player where he can adjust. But that might take a couple of months. So it's certainly not for round one for me. And I'd even stay away from him for draft. When you have a look at the fact that he's priced right around a Moses, right around a Dewey, you just go, why? Why would you do it? But we digress. Let's get on to somebody else who I find more interesting than Dylan Brown. It's meant to be the year of the centre wing, okay? And we're going to finish off on two guns here that are both centres, Best and Gagai. And they're intriguing for different reasons. Best at 656,800. He is a expensive buy. And because of the amount of options around him, nobody's going to get him. But he's actually coming off very quietly a career year of 67 points a game. He's only been 60 plus like one other season. He's been like threatening to be a 67 point type player for years. Last year actually did it, and not too much fanfare because everyone's kind of forgotten about him. But if you look at the splits on his season, it was quite remarkable. He ended up with 69 points per game, rounds 1 to 9. In the middle part of the season, 10 to 18, he was 83 points per game. And then to finish, he went 58 points per game on the run home. A lot of that was due to his injuries. So, you look at the fact and go, well, for 2/3 of the season, he was about a 75 point per game player. Could he be that? And I think the answer is, yeah, he could. And when you look at the numbers, he's 47 base power last year, only 6 tries in 18 games, which is really low. And you look at the fact that, well, was he boosted by some try assists and things? He actually only had 2 try contributions all year, which I guess is kind of a negative because you go, well, he probably doesn't have much growth under the new scoring system criteria. But I looked at it and went, you know what, like he could be a 70 plus points per game guy. And against the Cowboys round 1, that could be a good matchup. So I'm not going to go as far to say, Robbie, that I think he's in the top 5 or 6. I even think there's probably better pods than him. But I was surprised at how good he measures up. And I think that he could compete with some of the more elite guys this year if he has another career year follows on from last year.
Yeah, he goes through runs as well. So he strings together really solid games, and that's so you say that middle patch where he was averaging 80 odds. I wouldn't be surprised if his top score 116 and then followed up with a high 90 score and an 80 score after that, for example. So I feel like you're trying to get him on the run, and we got a good 3-game stretch to start the season off. Again, fits in the ultra pod category at 2%. And one thing, as you said on the numbers, is every year he has been improving in just the underlying stats. So obviously the average went up to 67, but over 60s, up to 50% now. Whereas back in 2023 it was about 40% of that. So he's been able to lift that up, and the base power was there as well, which is good. So you're starting off with a really solid foundation. So if you can get a couple of more tries during the year and a few more assists and that, then you're going to see an uplift in scoring and value. but I don't see him as someone you want to hold for the year. It's going to be for a run, and then if he starts to peak, get his price up to 750 or so, I'd be looking to jump off to an established gun at that point in time.
Agreed. And the opposite centre to him, Gagai's coming off a 60-point season. But the 2 years before that, he was 71 and 72. And I had a piece of him during that time because he was always a great guy to get in for a run. Super consistent, sort of 50-plus type of base power, more mid-40s base power last year with the drop-off. But when I looked at his numbers, one of the things with him is he's in that 500 to 600 range. So if you can't quite get to the elites, 590,000, when you look at his numbers, you can actually see growth. Now, he's quite old, so we need to put that in there. Maybe he digresses a bit last year. But, he had 6 last touch try contributions last year. They're going to go up. He had 5 try assists for a centre, which is really good. And he only had 2 tries, which is equal lowest in his career, and he's been in the NRL 10 plus years. So you look at the tries and go, well, the year before he had 8, and he's gone down to 2. There is just so much growth in that 60 price point that I can easily see the numbers saying he's a 70 plus guy. You got 10 points of value, 70 plus is elite, and you pay $40K for him. The ball's got to go that way. And this is the other thing as well. How much does the new combinations and things affect him? But we say that negatively, and that's the first thought that I had. Maybe it affects him positively.
Could, and he doesn't get injured as well. He played 24 games last year. He played every single game last year for the Knights, and is seen to play most games every year. So you're getting someone that's gonna be on the park for the full year, and he also doesn't explode as well. So as you were saying that you could see growth there. We're probably looking at about 10, 12 rounds time, and Gagai sneakily averaging 68 to 70 points, and that price slowly increasing. But no one ever talks about it. He just doesn't explode and really get that attention. So if you want someone that's gonna be there, play the whole year, and to have that potential to grow slowly, and that he's gonna be rock solid for you. But if on the devil's advocate side, as you said, he's getting old, and you've seen that significant points drop off from last year to the year before, and that. So father time gets everyone at some point. Is father time finally caught up to him?
Yeah, I think he went really late in my draft, like really late. And I think that's a really solid pick. And I wish I targeted more Knights later on, because guys like Best, Gagai, they would be pretty good in your drafts if you still got them to come. I'll go on to the next guy who's a fallen gun, and that is Dom Young. And Dom Young is in our fallen gun category because he went back to Newcastle and went 52 points per game overall for the season. A hard fall for him because the year before he was 72, the year before he was 63. He was building, 43, 53, 63, 72. He's kind of going up 10 plus points a game every single season, and then he drops by 20 points per game. But you'll kind of expect that when you're going from one of the top attacks to one of the lowest attacks. And this is what it comes down to with Dom, right? 21 raw base. He's going to have terrible raw base. He's going to have some terribly low scores. But he managed 2 tons last year. He also managed 16 points in 80 minutes. He's a guy that can score 150 and score 4 tries. Do the Knights have that attack in them? Now, at his price, 510,000 is very cheap for Dom Young. And I do think if it was 2 years ago, we all would have flocked to him. But we're a bit worried about what he looks like now. And if he's on that right-hand side, I think, what that happens with his try scoring, because he has to have those tries to boost his numbers. I'm not that interested in him, but I do think that he will go 60 plus this year and return to gun status. I just don't think it's going to be that 70 plus. So I don't see the need to do it when I could get some other guys that I think are better. That's all.
Yeah, I can see improvement, and the ball's got to go that way. So he's on the right side, the less dominant side. So I wouldn't be surprised if he got back up to the 60-point range, as you said. But he's not for me. There's other options. He's not going to be in that top echelon, and probably not going to get enough growth or value out of it and in particular over the long enough stretch that you're going to get any benefit out of it.
We've got another big pod to talk about, and this is our pod of the team, our big balls pod, and it seems strange because we've already talked about 2 and 3% owned guys, but I picked out this guy. And before we get to him, I'm just going to quickly mention the great sponsor and partner of the NRL Allstars podcast in oneworldcourier.com.au. Go to One World Courier online today. You can sign up for a free account, and it's going to be if your business or the business that you own has any type of shipping, freight needs, anything you got to send, they'll sort it out for you. Basically, it's a website where you can put in what you want to send and where you want to send it to, and it will show you all the different carriers that can take it. You just pick what one at what price, and then the One More Courier will take care of it all for you. So jump on, create a free account today, and where it says, where did you hear about us, put NRL All-Stars podcast, and they'll give you a great rate to start off with to trial them. So One More Courier, fantastic partner and sponsor of the All-Stars podcast. Our big balls pod for this one, an old favourite of both of ours, Big Greg Marzhew. How the mighty have fallen again, which seems to be the theme for this SuperCoach podcast episode of the Knights. 611,000, not bad, but we forget how much we used to love Big Greg. He's gone by the wayside a lot more than what I thought. I did get him in draft late, more middle rounds late, mid-late. So I'm really chuffed. 63 points per game last year. We're all searching for that 2023 season where he scored 77 points per game. And I think that he could get back towards there, not quite there, because I do like that left-hand side for the Knights. He had 6 tries in 18 games. That is low for him, incredibly low, in fact. The 3 years before that for Greg, he was 7 tries, 22 tries, and 9 tries. And the 22 tries was at the Knights, so it's possible to do it in Newcastle. It's crazy that he's still got a 50 base power and no one cares about him, but 50 base power, he could easily double those tries from 6 to 12, which is still far off his 22 mark a few years ago. And he's in for a bumper 72 to 75 point type of season. So I guess it depends, Robbie, how motivated he is, how well the ball gets out to him as well. And also probably if he keeps his job, because, there was talk that, Fletcher Sharp could go out on the wing there or something as well. But I actually really like Greg. Like if, again, there's just so many options at centre wing. If there was a few less, I could see myself going Greg over probably anyone else in this Newcastle backline as a big pod.
It wasn't too long ago that we were picking Greg Marzhew in our teams when he was mid-700s. That was not too long ago. So he has that potential to get there. And, as you said, 6 tries, 18 games. I don't think that's going to keep. I reckon there's going to be more tries for him. And that base is still there. So if you see that happening, he's going to increase his points, increase his value. I just have this black cloud in the back of my mind that who was the coach that discarded him last? Holbrook. Holbrook's the coach now. So look, I don't know. Yeah, you might have seen the light and that, but I don't. Yeah, I don't know if the coach really backs his game in, and there is a bit of, as you said, there is a bit of competition for that wing spot. So if Fletcher Sharp ends up moving out, he's probably going to go on the wing, and then they've got
Fletcher
the other guy. Don't know his first name, but the Fletcher Hunt. Sorry, he's there, had a bit of NRL experience. So a couple of bad defensive games from Greg, and he could be out of the side. So I think that's where the biggest risk lies. I don't doubt that he's going to increase his points, increase his tries, and increase in value, but it's just that job security that is always just doubtful in my mind with Greg.
You know what helps Holbrook with that, defensive deficiencies in Greg Marzhew's game? The fact that there's more on the other wing in Dom Young. So, he can't get too upset because Dom Young is pretty bad defensively sometimes as well. So I would actually go to say that Dom probably offers less defensively than what Greg does. So, yeah, it's one of those things. How much can he? He's not going to replace both wingers, and I feel like he'll be more prone to keep the left-hand side winger and shaft the right one. But I really do think that Marzhew could be one of the best under-the-radar guys for the start of the season. I'm going to back him in for at least 1 try this weekend with the Knights, and I'm also going to go for the double because I reckon there's great odds for that as well. I'm going to turn over to you here. I want you to sell me on Mooney because Mooney is $442,000, and I've been up and down on him. I have thought that the masses have kind of overrated him, And when I look through the numbers, he's barely had a meaningful game of minutes ever in his entire career in like 5 years. So, yes, he had a really impressive one last year where he finished on 78 points, playing 55 minutes, 44 in raw base. Yeah, that's nice. But he's been in the league for like 4 years, and he's never really played any meaningful minutes. So I think a lot of people, including some content creators, which I understand, you've got to go off the numbers, are going off the fact that he's, PPM's 1.47, 1.12, 1.41. If you're only playing 39, 29, 24, and 14 minutes a game, then of course your PPM's going to be high as a big fella. So yeah, you need to sell me on him on why, as a starter, he's going to be able to maintain this or be as valuable as what people are saying.
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, price point. The price is a good entry point where, you've got, you're not going too cheap and dirty, going to the mid 300s as in your starting two, and then not quite going up to the high 500-600s where you're looking at the Toby Couchmans and the Kalama-Tungis at that point. So I think the price is enticing coaches. And as you said, we haven't got a real read on minutes. He only played 4 games last year and they were sort of all over the place. And I guess the 2 games that really stick out that people will look at, and it's small sample size, you can't really draw too much from it. He averaged 83.5 in those 2 games. Now, granted, there was attacking stats in there, but when I look at it, he averaged 46 base in those minutes, which were over 40 minutes. So you'd think in that pack, he'd be easily getting 45, 50 minutes plus. Where I'm at the moment, I'm expecting him to get about 50 minutes, and that PPM, he's not going to do a 1.47. If he is, he's going to be the top ranking prop in the game. So I'm probably expecting a 1.1 PPM if you go there, and you're probably looking at about a 55 average, 55 to 60 average is where my expectations are at. And as a starter early in the year, I'm willing to pay for that. So he's pricing at, mid to low 40s and that. You're getting about 10 points in value. You're getting consistency. And really, it might turn out that with that, the depth in the pack, he might get more minutes. He might get a 55, 60-minute role, potentially. And he is touted. He was behind a good Raiders pack, couldn't get a look in. So there's a lot of hype. I'm willing to start with him at the price point as my front row 2 with an expectation that I'll probably be getting a 55, 60, get a bit of growth in him, and then evaluate what's happening there.
It's all fair. And the price point's a big deal. 42,000 is nice. I guess the positives for me is the price point, and the other big one is that they need him. They don't really have any front rowers. So, Jacob Saifidi is the last man standing from their old front row rotation. They got Trey Mooney and what else,
And there's been a bit of word that he was going to come off the bench, which who knows, maybe on game day they might switch it up. Even if he comes off the bench, I still think he will get good minutes based on that pack. I don't think the whole news of him starting, not starting is a deciding factor for myself. Really, I am expecting him to get 50 minutes. And if he's getting 50 minutes, then I think he's a good pick at the price.
If he doesn't start, I would pivot personally. I'm quite worried that he's priced at 46 already. And I think that SuperCoach are a little bit mean in doing that price point because he barely played last year. He's barely played most of his career, really. 46 is a pretty high price point to have him start at. Like I expect, like you, that if he starts, I think that 55 is reasonable, and that 50 to 55 minutes, 55 points. There's a world where he could get 60 plus, of course, but I think that 55 is a reasonable expectation. That's 9 points, of upside, which is worth it. It could be a slower 9 points than what I think some people are expecting, but if he's off the bench, I could quickly see it being 45 minutes a game, which is still really good bench minutes. But that little bit lower, brings him into maybe only a few points of value, especially early on. I think there's other options. And I'll throw out there that, Paseka is $110,000 less. And if Paseka's starting and getting the same minutes, you've already made $100,000 by going with him. And their PPM can be similar as well. So there's probably some good comparison points. Jesse Colquhoun, $120,000 or $110,000 less as well. And he's looking at that 50 to 55 minute range, and again, about 1 PPM. Probably, less appealing as far as, Trey Mooney can offload, and I like that in the trials. But when you're talking about 100K plus difference, I just think it's too much unless he is definitely starting. and you're confident that he's going to go 55 plus minutes a game. And if you like his game, I mean, I understand you pick him over those guys if you like his game, but to me, he's got to start. And I would be looking an hour and a half before kickoff to see if he is. But yeah, I could see it being right in the middle, right, Robbie? I could see it being like not as near as good as what people are expecting from Mooney, which I think some people unfairly expect him to be too high, and not as low as the detractors, and certainly maybe a bit better than what I'm hoping. So probably in the middle is about fair for him.
If anyone's expecting 83.5 average, then scale it back a little bit.
Look, McEwen's the other guy that's in that range, but as a second row forward. And I haven't had him because of rotation worries as well. And look, when it comes down to it, Kent was going to be the potential starting second rower. He's now on the bench. I do think that there's, opportunity for Kent to go through the middle, and he probably will. But does he go 15 minutes on an edge and the rest of his time in the middle? That's my worry with Jermaine McEwen starting there. And if he gets 60 to 65 minutes, it's a pretty slow burn at 407K potentially to start with him. So I'm just a little bit worried. But look, in saying that, he should still be easily 10 points of value. So on our metrics of what's worth going for your money and getting your 100K, if there's 10 points of value there, you go for it. He's a 42 average price point. He's going to have 10 points of value. I'm a bit worried about some of the low scores and stuff that could be in there. But I had a look at it, and he actually did a 56 average last year when he played 60 plus minutes. And I was a little bit surprised with that. It was a decent sample size, half a dozen or so games. So I thought that he'd probably be more at 50. So if he can replicate that type of scoring in 60 plus minutes, he could still be viable even if he ends up getting spelled for 15 to 20. But obviously, a lot of competition, Robbie. There's a lot of other guys to look at as well.
Yeah, I want to see the rotation, and there's a lot of guys around that 407 mark that there's a lot of choice. So you got Lukey, you've got Hamish Stewart, Big Luch if you fancy Big Luch this year. So there's a lot of options that I think you're picking one of those guys, and whoever ends up getting the minutes is in a better team, who's scoring better, and that is probably where you're going to pivot. I think McEwen, he's got potential, as you said, if he averages that mid-50s, if he gets the minutes based on last year on his 80-minute games, but it's a wait and see for me at this point.
Yeah, it'd be an easy downgrade from someone that's not worked out. And I do prefer Lukey. I've got Lukey at the moment instead of him, basically, because I don't want both. Last one, he's a veteran, and he's almost like he's right around the same price point as between Mooney and between McEwen, 424,800. Tyson Frizzell. Now, a lot of people sort of overlook these veterans and stuff, but you've really got to look at the context of what's going on. His career's been going down, but 43 average last year, and that was only 43 minutes per game. So 43 minutes per game, it's a career low for him since he's been a starter in the NRL. And at 34 years of age, you'd expect that to continue. The problem is they don't have any big bodies. And, you got Saifiti, you got Mooney. Who else do you have? So he's starting at 13 at the moment. I think that they have to, and I think that he's going to be in the front row forward rotation potentially. Like, all of a sudden you look at it and go, well, how could he not go back to, 55 minutes a game or something, or at least 50? And 1 ppm last year playing in the middle, he should be able to do that. And you go, well, is he the forgotten guy? Like, it's a bit proven with Tyson Frizzell at least, whereas Mooney and McEwen are a little bit unknown. We know if Tyson Frizzell is starting at 13, he should get 50 plus minutes a game. That should be at least 50 points a game. And he's got upside to play 55 plus minutes a game, which is going to be 55. That's 12 points of value right there. So it's not sexy. It could be a slow burn, but if he is really legitimately their 13 and they do realise they need the big body of Tyson, I think he's going to have a better season last year. He's not going to average 40s at least.
Yeah, it's all minutes dependent. So, last year, this 44 average, that was all base and power, no attack in that. So, there's very little upside to him. So if you really want to go there, you're just buying him on the sheer fact he's going to get that, 10 to 12 minutes uplift based on that rotation, as you said. But then again, I'll probably look at him and say, if I want to go a bit further down, and you got the Colquhouns, the Fleglers, if he ends up getting and everything like that,
I'd rather them too.
You're really going down, saving 100 there, putting your money elsewhere. So I can see it, but that's probably where I'm at, where I think the money's better put elsewhere, and you're going to get more out of it.
Yeah, and someone like Mooney does have the upside. Like Frizzell's got no upside on like what his ceiling is. Like his ceiling is going to be that sort of 55 type of area. Whereas at least Mooney's a young guy. He does have an offload. He can give you a bit more. And it's probably down to your preference on how you want to score your points, because this is the important part, right? And I'll finish on this. A lot of teams are like, yeah, you know, I'm going to grab all these mid guys and have a mid-range type team. And okay, but you got to play them. And even if you don't go for that build exactly, you're still going to have to play multiple mid-range guys. So what guys are you comfortable are going to be able to score you solid, consistent points? And if you can get 50 to 55 out of someone, that's great. But like if you've all of a sudden, if McEwen's like a 40-point player, that becomes really hard because you're playing that guy at that price point. Most teams would be anyway. And that becomes difficult. Whereas someone like Frizzell, you know his floor is like 50 plus because he's going to consistently get those minutes. And Aiden Tolman build these days, he's just meat and potatoes and he's just going to get there with his work. So I guess it depends on that as well. Like, are you playing these mids in your team build? And if you are, you know, do you just want that solid 50s or do you want to shoot for some upside and guys that can score maybe a try and McEwen and have those big weeks? It is something that you really need to weigh up. But we'll finish off on the Knights, Robbie. I will say, look, I think for me, I might sound like I've got none of them and maybe I'm here and there and I'm not really very decisive, but it's because I just have no idea how the Knights are going to go. And I think that's a general consensus. People, it's very tough to see whether they'll be really improved straight away, whether it'll take time, whether they're going to struggle. It's a new coach. There's just so many unknowns that it's really hard to make decisions for round one. But that's also why if you've got the balls for it, you can pick out a couple of guys and go for it and really hit the ground running with some of these Knights from round one as well.
Yeah. I mean, you know, going on that point, you know, Trey Mooney being the highest owned at 39%, everyone else is a pod, as you said. It's a lot of unknowns, a lot of unknowns. So I'm going in the year with two, you know, with Trey Mooney. But then, as I said earlier, Fletcher Sharp is my play and, you know, he's got that potential. So, yeah, you got to look at these sort of guys, get a bit of point of difference. But, yeah, a lot will be revealed and not too long till Sunday and we'll know a lot by then.
Certainly will. Well, Robbie, thanks for jumping on the podcast. Really appreciate it, mate. Once again, been a few now, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And everyone listening and watching, make sure you jump on YouTube, iTunes and Spotify and hit subscribe to follow the podcast, get the episodes straight away, and also to help support us as well. We'll have a couple of team previews next week because this team's not playing this weekend, and also big TLT episode on Tuesday for the big team list episode, which Mikey will be on for. But until then, have fun tinkering with your teams. Have fun watching the two games in Vegas. Can't wait to talk all about it again next week.
You'll never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Put the show on, get paid.